If you like what we do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and check us out on Patreon. Welcome back, everybody. So I wanted to come back to this series. It's been a little while doing the what's in my bag or my personal favorites. So I'm going to do this kind of mid 2025. I typically do it, as the seasons cross over 24, 25. But so much time has passed by. I figured, well, let's give it a shot and let you know what I'm liking these days. Now, obviously, I get to see a ton of balls, and there's a lot to like, dislike, everything in between. There's it's a little different take, but this is similar to my favorites. But I would say it's a bit more specific to what's in my bag, and in some cases, it's newer balls, some discontinued pieces. I simply still prefer for a slot. I'll take you through the slots per my Arsenal building, and you can see how you feel about it. If you haven't watched lately, please go back to my Arsenal building video to understand the basics of my six ball bag setup. So let's start with the strong defined. The biggest piece in my bag. So the highest volume management and a core with a defined motion. Right now, this is filled with the Motive Jackal Onyx or the Rotogrip XL. The Jackal Onyx is a bit stronger, so further up the chain for volume management, and also has earlier startup. So it's a fairly different shape from the XL. The XL would make the bag on a night where the pattern is maybe middle of the road, 39-43 feet, where being a bit rounder and a bit less ball makes it versatile. But I will say, honestly, the more I use the Onyx, the more likely it stays in the bag regardless of the pattern. It just has such a nice balance early roll that seems to always want to get going, but does that while still having nice punch down lane. It's kind of hard to describe it. You're going to have to watch the video. Believe it or not, for house shots, I still really like the Ebonite choice for this slot also. I only bowl house shots on the occasional UBA weekend, but the ball, even while being a hybrid, is plenty strong for any house pattern we see around our area. Now, next, I'll move on to the strong control shape. The Motive Evoke makes quite a regular appearance there, as does the Rotogrip Optimum Idol for me. Between those two, they've made about 90% of recent appearances in my bag. The Motive Evoke offers excellent control while not being too early or lazy, seems very versatile and can be used on many different patterns. It's willing to go a little longer, make the corner while also slowing down enough but balancing the back end motion to compensate. It's kind of a good chameleon. Maybe the mixed colors make perfect sense. The Optimum Idol is a bit more firm, down lane. It's a strong cover with a pretty strong back end and a smooth transition, between the two. And because it's a bit more firm, like I said, with what it is. And what I mean is, it isn't quite the chameleon like the Evoke. It requires oil to work, or it simply will be too much ball. It will overhook. Now, sometimes I want that firmness. Sometimes I want the versatility. The other part of the time, I bust out the good old Phase 2. Not much to say on that, but newer balls are dominating the appearances currently. Moving on to mid-define, this is the good old shiny asym that we've always liked, typically anyway. It's a slot that doesn't get as much use for me in a shiny finish, as I mostly bowl on sport shots, and 3 games on the left side by myself means I rarely use anything shiny. Now, I don't agonize too much about this slot. There are a lot of pretty good options. When I originally wrote the script prior to the Evoke Hysteria being released, but that thing definitely has to get a look for this spot. It's really a standout piece. I really like that. Prior to the Hysteria, from Motive, the Crimson Jackal is definitely my favorite. It does what I expect in this slot very nicely, regardless of the condition. I'd say it's a bit of a toss-up for me right now between the Hysteria and Crimson, and because I like the Onyx, I like having the same core in the bag in a cleaner cover. I'll make a comment here. The 900 Global Zen 25 is pretty nice ball for the slot these days as well. It's newer, maybe a touch firmer than the Crimson Jackal, but it also has the continuous look of a symmetric, which is sometimes too much. Sometimes I just want the ball to be a little bit more forward to kind of give me a little bit more control front to back. The Equinox is another that may get the nod for a house shot tournament, but possibly also sport shot because it is an asym and does have that little bit of a forward look. It's a pretty traditional shiny asym look from Storm, and that's always been a nice spot for me on house shots. Allows me to use bigger cores on the medium volume. I've used these balls with surface as step downs also on sport shots like nationals, which I'll do a separate video on. Next is mid control, and this I typically look at it as a step down to the strong control and a benchmark type slot for house shots. I like it to have a relatable shape, so it sometimes depends on what I have with me in strong control. And one of my favorite currents is the Storm Ascent. This is a very underrated ball, or Summit Ascent. It's very underrated, as I said. I used to use a Storm Furious on my house shot as a benchmark ball, and this was an R2S solid cover with a light bulb type, what was called turbine core, 2.55 RG, 038 diff. Very stable but strong and angular enough to carry well on house shots. Now these days, the Summit Ascent offers the same cover stock with a similarly shaped but stronger centripetal AI core with a lower RG and a 056 diff, and that makes it a bit more of a benchmark for my current age, game and conditions. All that said, I have to give airtime to two other balls I still bring a fair amount, the Motive Primal Shock and Venom Shock. In all three cases, the covers are somewhere in the 3,000 to 4,000 Avalon finish for me typically. The Primal gives me a good step down on sport shots when Motive is the shape in the bag. Venom Shock is very similar, but a little less for me. So when we have medium or lighter patterns, I might bring the Venom Shock instead of the Primal. Now moving on to the mid-late shape. Originally, when I wrote this script, I was pretty stuck on the Road Warrior. And while, these balls don't come into play often for me, the Storm Road Warrior was my favorite. Ever since I switched to 14, the High Road series in general hasn't quite hit the mark with its two-piece design because of the change in the core specs. The Road Warrior changed that with the AI core. And for house shots, it's a great partner to the Summit Ascent. With that said, sometimes you need lesser ball where you can stay in front of yourself on tough patterns. And while I thought the Storm IQ Tour AI was a fairly clinical review on our house shot, it has made its way fairly consistently in the bag on sport shot patterns I bowl on almost exclusively. And I've really been able to experience the length but smoothness, but yet consistent motion off the end of the pattern, which surprisingly gives more front to back control than the Road Warrior. And it kind of makes the ball pretty special, I have to say. So I feel like I underrated it in the first review, to be honest. At least, looking at it for house shot versus sport shot. Now, the IQ Tour Ruby is also a good one, but with the AI being the latest one and being a hybrid, allowing it to be a little smoother off the end of the pattern, it's becoming my go-to. Lastly, for the specialty balls, I never leave home without a Storm IQ Tour 78U, at least until recently, mostly because it's my spare ball, but also gives me a possible urethane shape when needed. It's quite weak for me, so it has to be a really good matchup to make sense as a strike ball. And that's where the Storm Level comes in. This ball, I'd say, is beastly for me in the usability factor. It's kind of shocking how useful the specialty ball can be, which makes it a bit of an oxymoron. The level comes into play on any shorter pattern for me. It play on medium patterns where the outside's on the drier side. It comes into play on house shots, both fresh and messy. Like say after lots of open play, the level is oddly magic for me. It just kind of blends all that nasty mess out, and it's becoming almost a benchmark ball for me. I'm also considering it as my spare ball on higher volume patterns to avoid having two specialty balls in the bag. Well, that's it for me. What are your favorites? Do you agree with any of these? Any surprises? Write me in the comments. Let me know what you're using. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.